Okay. Hello, everyone. It is a great honor to be here, and thank you so much to EAJRS for having me. This is my first EAJRS conference, so I'm especially humbled to have the chance to be the guest speaker. And I'm going to put on a little timer so that I can keep track of myself. So my talk is on automation, AI, and coding in Japanese librarianship in particular. And today I want to focus on practical applications of using AI and coding in everyday work in Japanese studies librarianship. Also, I will apologize because I thought I would be able to see my notes, so I may stutter a little bit here and there. But at my institution, just to give you an idea of the type of environment I work in, the University of Colorado has a medium-sized CJK collection of maybe 200,000 volumes or so. And in my case, I can speak Japanese, but my colleagues in acquisitions do not. And so I have to be able to work with my colleagues who cannot speak or read any CJK languages. Fortunately, we do have two catalogers who can catalog in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, so we are supported there. But it does create a need to be sensitive to my colleagues who have different language abilities than myself. So I also want to discuss the idea of automation in general. I think that is actually the umbrella concept that we are thinking about here. And what is it we are trying to do with automation? And so I think it's fair to say we want to do our work faster. And to be more specific, we want to do boring work faster. We want to enjoy the creative aspects of our job, the parts of our job that require intellect, complex decision-making, and other such things. And of course, this is a chance for us to work through the decision-making processes we need in our jobs, to come up with new ideas, to innovate, to have new opportunities to learn and develop new skills, because in theory, automation should be enabling us to do these new things. And I do think it is a very important and human thing to be able to relax a little bit more. So sometimes when I have some of my processes automated, that is the perfect time for me to get a coffee or take a nap and feel better about the rest of my day. And so we want to automate more easily, and that is what artificial intelligence can help us with. But it is not the whole entire picture. If we want to automate more accurately, we need to also have some level of technical skill, and that could be knowing how to code in a programming language. It could also be being very good at a program like Excel, which has a lot of features to make our jobs go faster. Automation doesn't have to just be coding. It doesn't just have to be the use of artificial intelligence, but we can mix these two things together to achieve better results. And so the examples I'm going to give today of how I use AI, I am hoping that these will be things that you can easily implement when you return home and you kind of get fresh perspectives on how you might use AI for everyday tasks that frustrate you, that you find annoying, that you find boring. So I think what's important is to have a framework for what AI is for and what automation in general is for. First, and I think most important, this is the keystone of my entire decision-making process for how I want to use AI, is verifiability. Is what AI does accurate? Is my automation process accurate? And can it work? Because if I have to spend so much time checking, then it ruins the time savings I'm supposed to be having. And so expediency or speed is also important. So it should be verifying, should be quick. It should be easy, and it should be sustainable. And I think this is something we want of anything we do in our job. So this is not a unique concept to automation. And then expertise, we cannot be replaced. I don't think so. I hope not. And there's two types of expertise specifically. So there's subject expertise, which would be our knowledge of Japanese language, culture, the studies we focus in, all of those things, as well as technical expertise. And this is things like, can we code? How well can you use Excel? How well do you use technology in general? And that affects the kinds of choices you might make. If you have low technical skill, there's still plenty of opportunities to use AI to assist you. But maybe some of the more complex use cases I'll show might be a bit more difficult to implement. And then active learning or passive learning. And I think this is really important. I think for anyone educating students, this is something that you're thinking about a lot and worrying about a lot. And it's behind the menu here. But are you developing a dependency on AI, or are you using it to learn and engage in new ways? And it's important to be critical of yourself using AI technology, because it can be very easy to let it do it for you and slip into bad habits. And of course, I think the last pillar is reputation, which is simply, do you care if it works well or not? If you're trying to work as fast as possible, but aren't concerned about your reputation, then you'll probably embarrass yourself at some point. If you do care, you're going to take time to start with the core idea of verifiability and make sure that the work being produced by AI, the work you do in automation processes are good outputs. So my first example is using AI to help you build your collection, asking it to give you book recommendations on a topic. And it's very convenient that we are talking about Kuzushiji earlier, because Kuzushiji is also my example. So actually, my graduate students are very interested, and we had a gap in our collection for Kuzushiji learning materials. So we had Kuzushiji Jiten, but not other Kuzushiji materials for students to read, practice with, train on, that kind of a thing. And I wanted to build up the collection in that way. And I thought, oh, this might be interesting. Let's try AI. Also, when I refer to AI, I'm usually referring to either ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. And in both cases, I mean the free versions that you can access without having to pay. So these are things you can do without a professional account. So this might be hard to read on these screens, but I got 10 books suggested to me. And the first thing you should be thinking is, can I trust these results? Are these good results? And if you have expertise in Japanese studies, this is much easier than someone, say, who needs to support a Japanese studies collection, needs to support Japanese studies scholars, but does not have Japanese language ability. And unfortunately, 3 of these titles aren't real. Amazingly, there is no book in English called Introduction to Kuzushiji, at least according to WorldCat. I didn't find it on Amazon either, but imagine trying to check multiple places for a book that never existed and how much time that would take. It's like trying to prove there's not a toaster in orbit around the sun. It could take you far too long. But they're very convincing titles. And I will say, so the third result there is reading and writing Japanese, and there are lots of books that use those words very similar. So there is a book that sort of exists with this title, but it's not about Kuzushiji. This will be a Japanese 101, a Shokyu level textbook on Japanese, something like that. And but the authors are all real. And I'm not sure why the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science might be publishing a how to learn Kuzushiji book, but it's possible. But they're a real organization. You can go to their website. They have never written a book called Introduction to Kuzushiji. Likewise, John Marshall is also a real author who has written about Japan, and he writes about Japanese crafts and art, not about Kuzushiji. He has no book about Kuzushiji that I have found anyway. And so this is a huge waste of my time. So the other thing that's very obvious by a lot of these titles is that, are they even relevant? And no, none of them are. And that's very obvious just by reading the title list. And certainly a book like Introduction to Kuzushiji, which doesn't exist, isn't relevant because it's not real. The others, however, like Classical Japanese, a grammar by Haruo Shirane, it's a great book if you're learning classical Japanese, but it doesn't really teach you anything about Kuzushiji. So those are great books, and some of them are real books, but they're not actually relevant in any meaningful way. I also had it give me 10 Japanese books, and none of these are real titles. None of them came up in first search when I looked for them. So if you think of being really thorough to check for these titles, you could spend 5 minutes on each book. So I've just wasted almost an hour plus, trying to find books that were never made. This is a terrible use of AI. This is a bad example intentionally to show the dangers of relying on AI and assuming it just knows what to do. And I think that what's really important here is we as librarians, as information professionals, as people who understand metadata and data structures and the tools that have existed in our field for a long time that, we wish our students knew better, we wish the faculty and professors we help knew better, is actually really great. it gives you a new perspective and appreciation for the decades of work catalogers and technical specialists have done to create databases like First Search with structured data that makes it very easy to find and locate materials. So for example, in this advanced search, I do a title search for Kuzushiji. I also remove G10 from the title because we already have Kuzushiji G10. What I need are learning and training materials, which is slightly different. And then I just want books that are recently published. So please give me books that are published after the year 2019. So 2020 and onward. This is a much easier way to get materials for your collection. So there's no automation at all, but it's clearly the more efficient solution. And really, just because we have the opportunity to use AI doesn't mean we need to in the first place. And that's a really important thing. It's great if we're experimenting, exploring, trying new things out, but I don't think it should be a surprise sometimes when our tried and true methods and the skills we have as information professionals are actually the more appropriate skill set. And the traditions we have there, the techniques we've developed over the years, that's actually what matters. And so going back to the framework, if we look at these 5 pillars, we can kind of see that checking databases is time consuming and it's expediency. It's very slow to try it, especially if it doesn't exist. It takes a long time to confirm it truly doesn't exist. Expertise really depends on your language ability, how much you know about Kuzushiji already. The learning opportunity is minimal because it's just a group of non-existent. It's a set of fake books for the most part that have nothing to do with Kuzushiji if they are real. And reputation-wise, imagine submitting this list and telling your acquisitions unit to buy these books. And now you're wasting your colleagues' time who are getting very frustrated and very angry at you, quietly angry. Hopefully they'll call you out on your poor decision-making. But I would never risk my colleagues' time and my own reputation doing something like this without knowing that it works well. So another use case, this one I think will kind of stab at our hearts a little bit, is AI and translation. Let me go through the use case. So I said earlier, my acquisitions colleagues don't speak Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. They can't read any of the CJK texts. And so I do actually use AI translation. So as an example, here is a book that I have from a recent donation. And I could just give the Romaji, which is readable by my colleagues. And it's readily available in First Search, so I can bring that data over to my system for showing my colleagues. But reading to them Hakucho Satsujin Jiken that's not easy for them to say, pronounce, know what I'm talking about. They're not going to be certain how to spell it. It's not an effective way for them to look things up. But the Swan murder case, much easier. So that's an AI translated title. And just to give you an idea, this, I know spreadsheets, very exciting, at least for me, because I'm a nerd. But these are my giant spreadsheets. It's 38 columns of data. And that red square is where I put the translated titles. In this case, there's a lot of English only books, so those don't have translated titles, of course. But that's what my colleagues in acquisitions really appreciate, because it makes it easy for us to talk about the same book without them having to interpret Japanese pronunciation from me or anything like that. So it really facilitates communication. That's the primary purpose of translation in this use case. And in terms of verifiability, it's okay because of the way I'm using it. It's just internal. We're not putting this into cataloging records or anything like that. This is never data made public. It is fast and helpful for the purpose it needs to be, but it's not an official translation tool we're actually using. In terms of expertise, I would say that I can tell when a translation is weird. It's usually pretty obvious, but it's okay if it's good enough in this context because we're not releasing this information in an authoritative way to the outside world. Likewise, in terms of learning, it's somewhat irrelevant in the sense that the English titles are not for me and my colleagues are not studying Japanese. So this is a purely functional translation and nothing more. And the reputation is essentially does not hurt my reputation because I'm not trying to put it out into the ether. But I'm also in charge of Korean studies, and I don't speak any Korean at all. And I have to use some amount of AI translation to do my job effectively to support my faculty and my students who do Korean studies. A good example of this, we have a gift exchange program with the National Library of Korea. Their list has no English translation, but I can get a list of English titles within a minute And I can actually effectively choose which titles I'm going to accept from the National Library of Korea, which saves them time and saves them money because they're not sending me books that I'm going to recycle. And I know the books I'm receiving are the ones I want. So there is some use for this. And I think it creates a dilemma because really the best answer is we should hire a Korean studies librarian. That's the first thing we should be doing. But the line gets a bit more blurry, right? We were talking earlier about tools that help you read Kuzushiji like Mio, which is to some extent an AI tool, an automation tool. I use that sometimes when my students need help. I can't read Kuzushiji, not well anyway. And so the moral dilemma over using translation to get our work done is more challenging, and it becomes more nuanced the more we think about it. And there's no easy answers there. I think in terms of a language learning class, a student just using AI to translate everything is pointless because you're there to learn, and that is not learning, which is a very different type of scenario than the way I'm using AI translation in a sort of functional capacity. And if my job would fund my Korean learning experience, well, that would be lovely, but I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon. So next is the third example. This is AI and creating structured data. So take some text and put it in a table for me. Make it easy to sort, make it easy to analyze. Let me turn it into charts, do things like that. And this is very different from the last two examples because the last two examples are generative. I'm asking AI to generate things for me, come up with ideas. However, in this example, I am giving it the text and telling it to use the text I've given it. It's not coming up with new ideas. It's changing pre-existing text for me. So that's a very big fundamental difference. I think when you use AI in this context, this is a fairly safe way to use AI in really useful ways in your everyday job. So to give an example, I might look at Cine to say, look at interesting articles, interesting books, or something like that. And I need this data in a spreadsheet in order to facilitate interlibrary loan requests or acquisition purchases, something like that. I can manually copy this. Very exciting work. I'm glad I got my master's to sit and copy paste as fast as possible. Really great use of my skill and my education. But of course, the data is there and the data is structured. We have the title, of course, the author, the journal, the page numbers, the date, all these obvious things. So I'm going to give the chatbot a prompt. I'm basically asking it, hey, I want you to make a table, and here are the column labels you're going to give me to put this in. And I have to say, it does a really good job. If there's a mistake, it's usually pretty easy to catch in terms of the ways I've used this. Usually when I create a table, I often have to review it once for some reason, either because I'm going to add what collection I want the item to go to, or we're reviewing duplicate copies. So I'm still going to check each row, but I don't have to spend time figuring out how to take all of that data and put it into a table that's easier to use. And what's kind of neat is I can also ask it, hey, give me the romanization for the titles. And we now have sorry, that says translated. It should be transliterated. So I have actually it is translated. I'm sorry. So I have translated titles just to facilitate. Maybe I have a undergraduate student helping me who can read Japanese, but their Japanese isn't good enough for some of the materials we're working with. So it's a facilitating tool. But I have here Ono Tozaburo, and it has mistransliterated his name. Though I will add that if you go to the web NDL authorities, there is a version of his name that can be Ono Juzaburo, but I've rarely seen it actually said that way. More likely, it's been mistaken that way several times in different texts. So it's sort of included as a, be aware that you may see the name written in this way. And as we all know, Japanese names, Japanese place names are notoriously difficult to know how to pronounce, even for native Japanese speakers. So it's really important, again, as a librarian, to know of authoritative places to look at information like this, to instinctually know if something is a name, a place name, a person name, et cetera. That's where our subject expertise is really important. And so again, looking at the framework, we have these differences that we can consider. The accuracy is quite high. Usually I'm not putting that data out into the world. I'm using it to complete a task, either to make a purchase, to do a collection analysis, something like that. It's internal, so it's fine that maybe it's 85% accurate and relatively easy to check that accuracy. Expedience-wise, it's incredibly fast, much faster than trying to do it by hand. So fast that I think it really deserves some consideration, that it makes my job so much easier. Expertise will depend on what exactly you're doing. With Japanese materials, Japanese language ability, of course, matters. We did this exact thing with a donation offer for a history of science collection from Europe and North America. And we ultimately decided to say no to that donation, but we were able to say no very quickly thanks to making a table and doing a duplicate check. Likewise, learning, it's not necessarily a learning opportunity, but sometimes it is the way I end up learning new Japanese words. And in fact, in many of these examples, my vocabulary gets improved because of some of these processes I use. And reputation-wise, again, these tend to be internal processes, so I'm not banking on the accuracy in a public forum. Next is I want to talk about using AI to make very complicated formulas in Excel. This is a very long and very boring prompt to create a very complicated Excel formula, and I'll talk about what it does. So what this Excel formula does is it can automatically convert currencies for me in Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, and Korean won. And I have a table that is doing a live currency conversion, and I have a table that tracks the prices of the things I want to buy. And you can see there's different colors everywhere. And unfortunately, the formula is covered by the bottom monitor, but it's a very long formula. And what to know about that is I was amazed that it did this almost immediately. The description took a little bit of time. This was maybe 10 minutes of creating a very descriptive prompt, and it pretty much got it right within the first 3 times of setting it up. But this is a great example where technical expertise is really important. How well do you know Excel? Do you know what tables are? Do you know what dynamic ranges are? Do you know how to name them and name ranges? Are these features in Excel you've ever used before? Likewise, with formulas, do you understand if, match, and index formulas, let alone how to use them together in one formula? And then there's something called nesting, where it's sort of formulas within formulas within formulas. This is a very nested formula. And of course, creating dynamic data, which includes things like currency conversions. You can get stock prices. There's some geography-based dynamic data you can use in Excel as well. If these are new features to you, this is much harder to do because you don't know the capabilities of the software, so you don't know what to ask the AI to do. And that's where technical expertise is really important. However, I would say that you can ask AI what features Excel has to do the thing you want to do, which is very helpful for filling in gaps in your knowledge. A really simple example might be if you have a picture of a flower and you don't know what it is, you can upload it to ChatGPT and ask it, what is this flower? And it will tell you. And you can very quickly confirm if it's right, because then you can look up that flower on Google and you'll know right away. It's a very easy way to get new information. So likewise, very fast compared to creating the formula itself. In something like this, the feedback is instant because either the formula works or it doesn't work. Expertise, I just went over that in detail with the technical expertise. Learning, because you can reverse engineer the formula, if you are willing to spend the time, it's a great way to learn to use more complex systems in Excel. That aspect of it is really, really helpful. And reputation, because of the verifiability, if the formula doesn't work, you're going to stop using it. You're not going to try and use it in a public way. So it doesn't necessarily hurt your reputation unless you're not confirming that it works at all and just simply sending it with no checking, which again, I think I've emphasized pretty well that that's just not something that we do. And so that was Excel formulas. These are Excel macros. So if you may or may not know, but you can automate a lot of things in Excel with macros. And the coding language for it is called VBA, Visual Basic. And I've had very good experiences using AI to generate code for me. So I have 2 examples, actually. So first is normalizing vendor lists. I get monthly vendor lists from our Japanese vendor, JPT, but I also get Korean lists. And what's really important is I need both of those lists to look the same in terms of the order of information. Because I have one spreadsheet they all go to in order for me to quickly make decisions about purchases. And so in this case, I wrote a macro that rearranges the vendor's spreadsheets so that I can look at them in a more efficient way that works for my workflow. So it's very customized to my needs. There is a new tech that Excel has come with called Power Query. I've just begun to look at it, but I was not ready to present on it, but that's another possibility. And so and so this has been really helpful for me quickly doing the work I need to do. And I need to push a button on that laptop to play this video, actually. Actually, let me see. Oh, I can do it with a clicker. So here's my email for the vendor. Oh, I'm all good, I have it. So here's my video for, oh, no, it's okay, I can do it. It works with the clicker, thank you. Oh, can you start the presentation again? It's okay, you can just restart the presentation like normal. Yes, I can. I didn't realize I could do it with the remote, so no problem. There's no image on this. Can you hit the presentation mode? I think that will make it reappear. Yeah. Thanks for your patience. So here, this is the vendor email. And all I have to do is select the spreadsheet, copy it, and then from there, the macro will take over once I go back to Excel. And I click a button and it generates an entire list for me. And I'll actually use I'll go to a second email because I'm a little bit behind. So I'm using the past 2 months of vendor lists. And it can combine them all into one list for me to go through quickly. Some of my more proactive faculty member, they get a copy of this list and choose the books they want themselves, which is especially helpful for Korean titles. And now I have about 700 books in a convenient list to work with. So very similar to before, because it's coding, the code either works or it doesn't work. Expediency, in this case, the more complex the code gets, the more troubleshooting you may run into. Simple examples usually work right away. Complex examples can be tricky. For expertise, the more you know about Excel and the more examples of macros you've seen, the better it can get. In terms of learning, you can actually ask you can actually ask AI to make your code more efficient, which in turn will actually show you better ways to do the coding. Additionally, you may know that in Excel, there's a developer tab that you can activate, and you can actually record yourself automating something. And you can look at the code directly to see what line of code does what. That's actually how I learned to program in VBA. And it was really helpful. And AI helped me figure out a few complex lines that I didn't know how to do on my own. And likewise, if code doesn't work, I'm not going to use it in the world. So the impact on my reputation is relatively small, though I have an asterisk. one thing that anyone who codes knows is that you can't prepare for every possibility. And so it's okay that bugs happen. That's a normal part of coding. What's most important is that you can be responsive if you're sharing your code to fix it. And that's something that anyone who codes understands, and you work together with your community with. So people expect to see bugs in code. It's just that you have to have a communication pathway between you and others who might use that code. This is an Excel macro that was 100% created with AI. I was really amazed. I got this working within an hour or two. So because I have acquisitions teams who can't speak Japanese, I need paper slips in donations in order for them to look at the books and know what to do. So they can look at my spreadsheet online, but they use a number on the spreadsheet to compare. They bring it, these slips also have the OCLC number, which lets them import the record into our system. So, but making these slips is a little bit of a pain, and so I automated it. So here's a quick example. So this is a donation that I have. This is my slips sheet that I can print out. And whatever row I start on and activate the macro, it makes a slip of everything on that row and below instantaneously. And if I move down lower, you'll see that it only makes 3 now. And I'm going to do the last row in the last example. So I can customize it instantly to the level I need. And that took me 1 hour to do, and it speeds up a huge part of my process. So I also want to talk about coding in JavaScript. And I have to point out some flaws in this picture. I don't know why there are 2 cups of tea. I don't know why they have no notes. And also the kanji are complete nonsense. I think most of us know that AI cannot produce text very well, let alone Japanese text. So I wanted to come up with a way that students, especially my grad students, could instantly copy Japanese text and create a set of flashcards for the text they're about to read, so that they can, instead of reading word by word, read sentence by sentence or maybe paragraph by paragraph. This is what the end result. And it does, because of our setup here, I can't demonstrate it the way I thought I would. But you can paste the text into that box, and it will reformat that text into a file format that will work with the program Anki, which is a famous open source flashcard app. And you can put your vocab list into the app, and then you could spend 10, 20 minutes studying the words to prepare to read, say, a classic text, or even a modern text that you're still learning. And that way you can any student can prepare for the text they're about to read in a new subject area, anything like that. Let me jump back. One thing I'll add is a future endeavor is I want to have a filter built in so that you can remove, say, all the JLPT5 words, all the JLPT4 words, et cetera, because advanced readers don't need to learn koko, soko, asoko, doko. Those are not the kinds of vocab that they are needing. So this is not designed for beginners of Japanese. This is designed for advanced Japanese learners. And then finally, moving away from AI use and just talking about coding in general. So I code in a language called Ohridski, or AHK for short, and it is very easy to learn. You can create a working program in 10 minutes. There's a very good tutorial that shows you how it works. Of course, mastering it will take longer. It's open source. It's very well supported with a good help community. However, because it's, for whatever reason, AI just does not know a lot about this programming language, and it can't give answers to this language. It's not a good tool for learning to code in. It's also only available on Windows. So if you're a Mac user, this is not a tool you can use, though I believe perhaps Apple Scripts is a good equivalent. And I think that AI can work with Apple Scripts, but since I'm not a Mac user, I've not been able to test this. So just as a reminder, this is the giant spreadsheet I use to prepare my acquisitions processes and send my purchases in. And I just wanted to kind of quickly show what it looks like. So in this case, I've got an ISBN and a Japanese title, and I just hit a key to start the process, and it automatically opens First Search for me. And it knows if it's a ISBN or not, and it just looks for it. I want to get the first record. That's the best quality record, in my opinion. And once I land on the WorldCat record, I just ask it to go back into my spreadsheet, and all of that data appears there instantly. So that includes publisher, OCLC number, subject headings, etc. This is just another one. This is done with a title search. One other feature it has is it will also tell you how many other libraries have the item, which was something I added after working with our special collections unit. They're currently using this tool for a donation that they're receiving. And this works with any language. It does not have to be Japanese. So in this example, you might remember my Kuzushiji example. So here I am doing a search of Kuzushiji books I want to buy, and I can go through these. I'm opening up several tabs, and I'm going to order these books. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, I want this one, put it in the spreadsheet. You never thought you would stare silently at spreadsheets this much, but it's one of my favorite things to do at work. But you can, my spreadsheet is 38 columns because I'm not actually handwriting any of this. I have this tool to do it for me. So the spreadsheet and the automation tool work together. If you're interested in using a tool like this, maybe you know Python or R or something like that already. But if you've never coded before, I do think this is a great starting place. The fundamental concepts you need to know for coding include these concepts: variables, arrays, conditionals such as if, then, loops, making it repeat over and over until a condition is met, regular expressions, which is really just a way of text manipulation, of editing text, removing text, replacing text. Functions are a way to make your code much more convenient, and it's a really important concept to know early on in coding. And parameters help you make a function do very useful things, essentially, as an easy way to explain it. So again, this is an opportunity where we have to test the code a lot, see if it works. As your code gets more complex, you're going to realize that you can't account for every possible situation. Every now and then, I have to manually enter something or fix a title, or sometimes one piece of data doesn't come at all, and I just take care of that manually, but it's relatively rare. Expediency, it does my work incredibly fast in a way that I could never do on my own. Expertise, this was a long time learning, but I've actually had a working version of this for several years now, but as my abilities have improved, I've refined the product over time. Likewise, in terms of learning, it can free your time up to learn other things. And in terms of reputation, I'd say there's a small risk because as other people use it, you'll discover if you have usability issues. You've made it for yourself, but how easily can others use it? Likewise, they will experience bugs you've never encountered, and you have to help fix those for people if you want to have other people use your tool and share it with others. And then just a few solutions that I've come up with, really simple things. These were much easier to do, but I wrote a script that automatically converts ISBN 10s and 13s back and forth. I have what I call better copy paste, where I have to, of course, put many links into emails. So I have it set up to automatically take a record and just put the title of the book in and automatically link it for me. I don't do any of that by hand anymore. I also, if you use a Mac, this is not a problem, but for those of us that use PCs, you know it's very painful to try and get a macron O or U. And now I can just type it instantly on my keyboard. Same with currency symbols. And I also have a script that automatically converts Japanese and Western dates, but only 1868 and forward. And these little changes save me so much time at my job. And I really appreciate having this tool. But this is accurate automation, but it took a lot longer to learn. So this is a non-AI automation solution, but I wanted to demonstrate it because I think it's really important to consider these kinds of hard technical skills. I think AutoHotkey is a really great entryway for people who are worried about coding or how much time and energy it can take. And that is my presentation, and thank you so much for listening.
I would like to thank Professor Lisbon for his speech. He actually completely changed my mind about AI. I used to be mad at it because my students use it for actually doing their homework for them. But now I see that there are a lot more clever ways to use it. So thank you very much. And it's time for questions.
Thank you very much. So I'm Chris Dillon from the British Library, and I think a lot of people are probably very interested by the cataloging examples. So, for example, Signy Books. So it's not so much a question; it's more just a request that it'd be really interesting to hear just more about what you were able to do with that. Actually, yeah, I'll check in the. I'll be a good boy and put a question in and say, have you done anything with, well, what I tend to think of as Frankenstein records? So you have one record that's got a really good body, and then you've got another record that's got a really good head. Then you get a generally very good record, that sort of thing. So have you done this sort of thing with more than one data source, I think is probably the question.
So more than one data set for which example? Sorry.
So for example, if we went back to the Signy example,
okay,
so
yes.
that it was great to sort of see you getting the data out of Signy, but what if we sort of have another data source and we want to say, oh, could you just mix the data from these two data sources into one record?
Good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. He was asking, what if you have two different data sets and you ask it to do both of them together? So I've never done that. I have done it with a Western language data set, but it was the same set. And I would say that probably what I would do is I would, in terms of how AI works, especially ChatGPT, I would ask the first question, let it create that table, and then I would give it a second data set and say, please put this data into the first table in the correct columns and see if it can do it. My experience is that it would probably work quite well, but the more different the data gets, then that creates new kinds of challenges, and you're starting to ask a fundamentally different question, I think.
Thank you very much indeed.
Very quick question. Thank you very much for the presentation. So you are very much involved with selection and helping your cataloging colleagues. I was wondering if you also teach information literacy to your students on how to search, and if you had any plans of involving ChatGPT or AI in that.
Not yet. So to get into the weeds a little bit, it's taken a very long time to convince my faculty to have a research methods class with an embedded librarian. There was no Japanese research methods class for, I want to say 7 years now, but with a new professor who came, we did our first class together where we worked together to create the curriculum, but we didn't involve AI yet. So I think in our next lesson, we're going to start talking about that. And now that I have a presentation conveniently created, we'll probably integrate these examples into the course to like show the dangers of using it as well as the benefits. And that critical thinking skill that we all rely on from our higher education is still very much in play when we incorporate AI.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You talked a lot about how it is important to share your code with others. So do you share your source code?
I do. Because I wasn't entirely sure of the format and timing. I have a GitHub. So if you Google my name, Adam Lisbon GitHub, you will get it. And you can actually, you can download the code, and you can also download a little executable file, and you can download the spreadsheets also. So they're all on my GitHub.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't have a question, except maybe it's a very lowbrow question. When you prompt, is there a knack to formulating prompts? I mean, it looks at sometimes it's fairly, novelistic what you write, and I mean, how much does that define or impact on the results you get? The way that you actually formulate, it's still natural language that you use. But nevertheless, the syntax and so on can have quite an effect on what you get out from it, I suppose. And I don't know whether there are any rules for formulating prompts.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So in ChatGPT, you can have a conversation and it can remember instructions you give it, which is very useful. For example, in the AI translation tool, I wanted a very specific format. So the first time I asked it to translate, it created one long paragraph with no spaces between the titles, which is useless. So the second time I had to say, please make a list of separate lines with the titles. And it did it, but it gave me the title Romanized and not translated. So I had to be very explicit about translating it into English from Japanese. And it did it, but it made the translated title, put it in quotation marks, and then put the Japanese title after it. And I said, no, please don't include the original title. And it was able to do it. And one final time I say, please do not put quotation marks around the title because I don't need the quotation marks. So you can train on ChatGPT, you can train it to do things in a specific way, and it will start to remember that exact process. If you've not used ChatGPT before, you can make different conversations. So I could, in theory, have 2 or 3 conversations for formatting things in a different way, depending on what I'm doing. But it's a really neat trick of ChatGPT that you can teach it. Copilot doesn't quite have that feature, at least in the way I've used it.
Does it make strings? I mean, how long does it keep your formal questions? Because if you let some time go by, it sort of comes back and says you can, ask me another question. It seems as if it's forgotten. So there must be some notion about a time lapse or connectivity or strings that probably the prompter has to keep in mind.
Anecdotally, it hasn't regressed yet. It still is translating and formatting the way I want it to. I would say that an example, though, a little different, when I've asked for code, if I've sometimes had it make code and then maybe I'll come back 2 months later and I'll ask it to add a new line of code and it completely messes up the entire code and I've had to start from the beginning again. So there are instances where it can't build on itself and then I have to start over again. I might start with, instead of one giant question, I actually ask 10 or 11 small questions in order for it to produce the results I want. So there's different techniques. And I think also all of this is changing. ChatGPT could be dead in another year and we're all using something else. They could come out with version 5 that's supposed to have PhD intelligence, which we'll see how that goes. So I think the answer I give now will naturally evolve over time as well. But I have found that, yes, how you ask the question is very, very important. And what seemed like a really simple question, translate these titles, kept giving me unexpected results. And it took 10 or 15 revisions to make it translate the way I wanted it to translate.
Another question, and Naomi Magnuson from the University of Oslo Library. ChatGPT, you talking about which version, and it is paid or not paid? Because University Oslo make a University Oslo GPT, which is closed. They say that the information will not go to there. But then we have to log on our university username and password, so I can come back to my session before, after several months too. So, but it looks like your version is not the same.
So I'm using the free version of ChatGPT. So I have a personal account with ChatGPT, and it so far has retained all of my conversations. I don't have a professional institutional associated account, so I don't know what the nuanced differences might be. That would be the kind of situation where we would sit down together and look at our screens side by side and see what kinds of things happen differently to sort of assess what benefits or challenges come up from that. So it's not something I can easily speak to because there's these really tiny minutia that could have a surprisingly big impact, but without me having my own institutional account, I can't know what those differences are. And so I think that element of curiosity is always really important in this. I think it's also healthy to assume that ChatGPT can do it and then make it do the thing you want to do, as opposed to assuming it can never do it. And if you try, at least you'll discover whether or not you end in failure or you achieve success. But I think that initial curiosity to keep trying is really helpful in that process.
Thank you very much.